Hi, everyone. I have a special guest today, Nathan, and he is going to introduce himself and let you know a little bit about him before we do this show today for everyone. And I just want to welcome everyone. And I know it's been a while, but we're moving along in these crazy times. Nathan?
Well, my name is Nathan. Actually, my full name is Nathan Ciszek, and I have a YouTube channel called Haujean Contactee here on YouTube. No website yet. A 48-year-old Milab. Um, I've been abducted. I've been abused by ETs. I've been led down the primrose road, or the path. I've been thrown into the New Age nonsense. I've been in a satanic cult, which I'm not a Satanist. That's not me, but it was an Enki cult, uses Satanism as psychological camouflage. It's called the Joy of Satan. I've been making an effort to expose that cult. It's an Enki cult. It's a soul trap, much like the New Age movement is. And it's all kind of come about because in the very beginning, I didn't know that I was a Milab. I wasn't even sure if I was abducted, which is how good they are at hiding it from you. And I thought that I was just one of these star seeds that is out there to talk about the Galactic Federation, make the world a better place, and do all this good stuff at Love and Light. When it turns out that what I found out is that the New Age movement, as well as that Enki cult that I was involved with, turned out to be something connected with military abductions and a MyLab program. I've had a hypnotic regression with James Rink from Super Soldier Talk. It didn't go as fruitful as I'd hoped, but it did expose one major thing about me, which is that my soul transference memory did not happen on another world. It wasn't something good. I wasn't being sent here in that memory to help humanity. I was actually in a hybrid container body, a super soldier whose soul was being fractured, and I was put into my mother at the 12th week after conception. And I found out through James Rink that this is something called Project Surrogate. There's not a lot of information on it. I think he's maybe one of the few people that is an expert on it, at least as much as you could be. And so I'm here to tell my story. And thank you for having me, Lauda. I really, really appreciate it. You're just a breath of fresh air, and you're not like most people in this community. I've I've struggled to get my story out for 14 years. I've contacted major researchers, podcasters. It wasn't until close to a year ago that one person gave me a chance, and that helped me actually get myself out of the situation. I was mind controlled, sexually abused. I've been made sick. I've had heart failure 2 times. I've never had a heart attack, thankfully. The first time was autonomic nervous system failure, which was induced by this military program. And then this spring, I got really sick again. They were trying to kill me and finish me off. But there is a happy ending to this, which hopefully we'll have time to get to, which has to do with separating myself from the silver cords that were connecting me to an alternate that they had at the White Sands underground facility, which is underneath the White Sands missile test range in the mountain range area. And that's where a lot of this stuff is coming from. It seems to be a hub for these types of, well, mainly, for the clone program, or actually one arm of it. I don't understand the whole thing, but I do know that they had a cloned alternate there that they were using to make me very sick. So I guess without further ado, and after I get a drink, I guess we should talk about the soul transference memory first. Would you like to talk about something else, or?
No, actually, that's a good place to start. I just want you to spell the name of your YouTube so everyone knows how to find you, because Haujean is a very unique name.
Okay, well, it's Haujean and Contactee. And after we get done, I'll send you the info so you can, put that underneath the video in the description.
Right.
So you guys can find me because I don't have a website yet, but the only place you can really find me is my YouTube channel. And I have a Telegram group too. So if anybody wants to talk, I'm always there. I spend a lot of time there to answer people's questions, and I interact with everybody as much as I can.
Right.
I'm as open as I can be.
So I wanted to ask you before you go into the soul transference, was there anything unique about your birth that you know? Were there any circumstances that were never really um, that never really made sense, or are there elements of your upbringing also that you could see are hiding some of these deeper
Yeah,
connections?
absolutely. That's a great question. You're actually, I think, the first person who's asked me that because you're involved in this yourself. One of the things that I noticed about myself was that I could remember all the way back to being an infant. I could remember being held, fed. I knew what foods I didn't like. Um, that's unusual in and of itself. The other unusual thing about it is that in these memories, a lot of them, I can remember actually having high level thoughts to where actually remember being in, I guess it's one of those holders where you, um, it's not a crib. I forget what they call it. It's like a car seat. You can carry the baby. I used one with my son. So, but anyway, I was in one of them. I'm on the floor and I'm looking up at my mother screaming. And I realized I actually have a very clear memory thinking to myself, I can't talk. I'm not able to communicate. So I'm going to have to scream and fuss as much as I possibly can to get their attention because they're not listening. That was one of the things. Throughout my life, when I was a kid, I had a lot of unusual experiences where I would sense a presence in the room, where I would sense a presence enter the room. I could also feel them circle me. It was like a directional sense. When I was a little kid, all the way up through my probably teenage years, whenever they'd enter the room, I would hear a loud, like a crack sound from the frame of the door. I got used to that. I actually started to like it because I thought that something special was coming, to visit me. And it all kind of starts with this soul transference memory, which I thought was in a heavenly realm because, that's what you're conditioned to think. And the memory itself was shrouded in a white haze. And the other interesting thing about it is that the individuals in the memory, there were three of them. Um, they had their faces shaded, and actually, it was even more than just shading. It was actually rectangles that were over top of their eyes, little squares over their mouths in some cases, and sometimes, their face would be completely shaded, but you could see their hair and the rest of them. And in the soul transference memory, we were speaking telepathically, which also led me to believe that it was heaven. And that's where I kind of left it. And then now I've also had psychic experiences that have happened throughout my childhood and throughout my early adulthood and throughout my entire life. All of these built up in me and, to let me know more or less that I was different from other people. One of the things that I always wondered about was why aren't other people psychic? Why, because I would hear about psychics growing up. I'd look into it. It seemed like they could never prove that they were psychic. And then of course, found out later that the ones who could prove it were actually classified and swept under the rug and not talked about because that's not what they want you to know.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the government fears people, developing psychic abilities. And ultimately, with Project Surrogate, apparently is a program. It's a joint ET program which is designed to kidnap psychic children. Most of these people, if not all, that would be kidnapped would have something that would be akin to an angelic soul or something similar to that. And that's something that I found out about myself over the last couple of months. It's not something that I really feel totally comfortable talking about because there's a lot of cliches attached to that, and it sounds very new agey and respect. But what I found out, what it really is that there are many extraterrestrial cultures that are deeply concerned and are in an effort to liberate humanity, and we incarnate our own people here. And when we do, the ones that pose a threat to the, the human race, 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 the human ra agenda that's happening here are the ones that get wrapped up in these types of programs and abducted, and then their souls are hijacked, they're fractured, they make alternate copies of you, and they can make hybrids and so forth. And then, you know, so what Project Surrogate apparently is, it's not just a way to kidnap, hijack you, and then use you. It's also apparently like having a test tube version of you that they put into society as like a placeholder. So while your alternates are in these programs, they can have you in society. And what they generally do to keep you from waking up is they make you sick. They do a wide variety of things, and they mind control you. And in my case, I kept fighting to wake up. So the psychic events were kind of like pacifying me and attempting, you know, to keep me under kind of a controlled narrative. And that's how I found myself in not actually wasn't the New Age first. I got involved with the satanic cult due to subconscious psychic programming and something I call subconscious psychic networking, which is where they subconsciously program you, and then they have other people that they program, and then they get them together to work in these little networks. And this is where I coined the term virtual temple complex, because the virtual temple complex that I was in, which was the Joy of Satan for about 7 months, literally turned my life upside down. And I met other people there just like me. One of them was a past life family member. And everybody that I followed as far as I could after that has had their lives destroyed, and their health as well. And it was happening beforehand, because that was one of the things that they do. They make your life a living hell. They make everything you try to do a failure. And then they program you to go into a cult like that that promises to change everything. In fact, it's the exact opposite. And what that particular group is an inversion of the New Age movement. It's just another take on the same program. So get another drink real quick, and then we'll get into it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you explain for everyone, just so that there's some detail about the Project Surrogate, how it's done, how they kidnap, how they take these angelics, because most of them are angelics, no doubt about it. That's what the government is hunting,
Right.
100%. So that people understand what the process is, and then maybe explain your experience of the soul transfer. Okay. And the difference between the tube version that they put in society versus the other versions, and what the differences are, just so people have more detail about the entire process.
Excellent. Okay. What I know about myself is that I've been coming here for 1.7 million years. I believe from what I understand, the human program goes back 1.9 million. If you go by carbon, let's see, I think it's 1.6 to 2.4 million years old is what they've determined. And this is like, you know, remnants from like, you know, fire and, you know, fire pits and spears and stuff like that. So I've been coming here for that amount of time. I know that about 1 million years ago, this is what, I mean, everybody's got a different story, a little bit slightly different information, but roughly from a vague sense, about 1 million years ago or whatever, I know there was a takeover of the human program, and it shifted into something that we've got now, which is basically a prison, more or less, with false religions and negative social engineering and basically soul slavery, soul harvesting, and so forth. So the angelics, more or less, would be those who would come here in an organized effort to incarnate here and fight the proxy war in the human container body versus engaging militarily, because it's mutually assured destruction. So that's more or less why this is happening. That's more or less, that's the story that you get from most of the people who've awakened to a certain extent in this community, and they'll all tell you about the same thing. I do know that I was hijacked, not this lifetime. The first time, it was actually a previous lifetime. This is stuff that's come out since the hypnotic regression. I was born in 47. I was abducted around age 7, and then I was cloned, at which point my soul was hijacked. I don't have any I don't have any direct cognitive recollection. I have an inner knowing of that. And since I've separated myself from their system by removing the silver cords, I've been able to interact with my higher self in a direct way and have a conversation. I can just literally blank my mind out and have my higher self speak to me and explain things. I've had things where I would look them up, things that I was told. And my higher self essentially is, I'm the avatar and I'm here to do something. So anyway, what I do remember is that when I was age 6, and then prior to that, I had some psychic experiences and things. My aunt had a haunted house, and I was very receptive to that energy that was in the attic. And so I had a kind of a rich life of psychic experiences. They were never something I could control. It was always obvious that somebody else was in control of it, and they would let me do a little bit, and then they would just completely stop it, and it just kept going on like that. So when I was age 6, I have this memory of being at the park down the street, from my house, and I was riding, and I just kind of a few months before that, I got a gift, for Christmas, and I rode the bike all the time. I still had training wheels on it, but I was able to get further and further from the house a little bit at a time. So the park was right at the end of my street. I only had to cross one little end street, to get there. So that was where I hung out a lot. And one particular day in the fall of 1980, I was riding my bike. It was getting close to probably about 4 o'clock. Sun was getting lower in the sky. And I wanted to go home to eat. It was time to go home. So I rode through the wooded path, and I came around the bend, and there was a rope swing area there. Some kids built a fort at one point, and it was a clearing surrounded by some trees next to the asphalt footpath that you rode to get back to the end of my street. At that point, being 6, I didn't want to interact with the older kids in the neighborhood because they like to pick on you, especially when you're young and you're by yourself. So I was a little bit anxious going through the path. I figured if I passed the swing and there were kids there, I would just ride straight through and not really give them much mind, because if I looked at them, they may mess with me. So, but as I got closer to the rope swing, I got a tremendous amount of anxiety and fear that wasn't normal. And as I came around the bend, I saw a group of people that looked like people, but they were a bit unusual because, at the time I didn't remember how many there were, but I recovered some of these fragments. There were 7. They were dressed in navy blue. They had hoodies on. They had navy blue pants. I don't remember what their shoes or footwear looked like, but everything was very uniform. And I noticed that they were wearing what looked like Halloween mask or ski mask or luchador wrestling mask, because they have very large almond-shaped eyes. I couldn't see the faces directly because I didn't want to look. But when I did glance a little bit, I saw what looked like a Halloween mask. I just saw it from the side. It was very, very white. It looked like chalk white, almost like that Scream mask from the Scream movies. It was a very almond-shaped eyes. The face was were actually heart-shaped almost. It just, like a gray, but white skin. I didn't know what this was. I thought it was kids in the neighborhood and like a ninja club wearing masks and wearing everything was exactly the same. The other thing was odd is they were exactly the same height. They were very thin, very wiry framed. I mean, it was very unusual. But you'd get 7 people that looked identical wearing the same exact outfits and wearing masks. And I thought that was just odd. So at this point I looked, and when I did, the one looked at me. I got like maybe half of their face. It looked like there was a mask over it because they had a white outline about a ½ inch wide around the eye, but it was a big almond-shaped opening, and it was all black, and there wasn't anything there. When I saw that, at this point, I'm like full of anxiety. That as soon as I looked at that, I got this shot of fear through my gut. It's the kind of fear that when somebody jumps out from behind a doorway and scares you, I mean, you get that jolt. It was that combined with the anxiety, but I also felt something. At the moment that hit me, I felt something, because at this point I was just past them. I looked at the point where I was directly next to them, about 15 feet away, and they were standing around a fallen tree. Behind that was a clearing. It's like a sandy area. I got hit in the back of the head by energy. It had like a viscous feel to it. It hit me. Oh, I gotta watch this microphone. It hit me right in the back of the head and it flowed down my spine. At which point, I just remember, and this is the screen memory aspect of it. I pedaled as fast as I could until I lost my breath about halfway up the block, and I stopped, and then I kept going after that. And I didn't say anything about it. And years later, I'd ask kids about it. Actually, when I was growing up, I'd ask people that, I grew up with in the neighborhood who were older than me, whether or not they had ever had a blue ninja club. Like there was a group that would, pretend to be blue ninjas and wear these masks. And nobody would ever, nobody admitted to it because it never happened. But what really happened was, and this emerged a couple of months ago from fragmented memories, is that when I got hit in the back of the head, I came to a stop. I just put my arms to my side and I froze, at which point I floated off the bicycle and the bike floated with me. I remember floating upward into the tree canopy, but then it just faded out into like a lavender, like a sky blue color, but it was opaque. I felt extremely comfortable. I felt completely relaxed. At that point, I had no fear. Whatever it is had completely overtaken me. And then I lost consciousness, and that was it. The other piece of the fragmented memory is apparently afterward when I was being returned, because I came in from the same direction that I rode in the very beginning, but I floated in. And I remember seeing a group of the grays at this point, because now I could see their faces. They had the big, large white heads, very, very narrow chins, and the big, large eyes. And they were standing in a circle, and it looked like, I call it the Stonehenge configuration, because they had their arms outstretched, and one was their hands were ever like this. And they were standing in a circle, and there was a light above them as if they were going to be levitated up into the craft that took me. There was no missing time. It just appeared that it was something of an overactive imagination. And that's what I put it away in my mind as. But I always had a bad feeling about it. I always wondered what it was. And it wasn't until recently that it actually came out. That was the abduction where they took the clone of me that they were using at White Sands, because that was a complete copy of me. So that's that. Now, the soul transference memory, which is I've had since I was it's probably I consider it my youngest memory. It's as far back as I can look into my to my memory bank, really. And it came to me, I don't know where it surfaced, but it was always there. I forgot some of it, and in my late teens or so, I started to have flashbacks. It was like one piece after another. It was unusual because not just that, but now the fog was starting to fade. It wasn't a white room memory like I had looked at it. It didn't have that angelic or heavenly feel to it. It had more of a medical lab feel to it. It did not feel like heaven at this point. And the other interesting thing is that the flashbacks came in chronological order as the events in the memory, transpired. I was actually getting a little piece of the time that fit right in, which showed me that somebody was putting these in me. So to get into that, what happened is I find myself in this room, in the original memory, which is what I'll start with. It's a very, very white haze. There's a machine of some kind next to me. There's a table, or actually a counter, or like a long kind of table that's mounted into the wall at the far end of the room. The left-hand corner of the room, there's a computer terminal and a chair. There's a table to my right and something on it. There's objects. I can't make out what they are. There's 3 people in the room. They look to be Haujean extraterrestrials, which are the ETs that I began having contact with at the end of 2005. I had prior contact before that, but I never got a chance to see them. It was always a voice. It was always, like a vision of something. There was never any direct interaction, and I call it one-way contact, and then it became two-way contact. The Haujeans are close to 8 feet tall. They look Polynesian or Indian. They have vertical slit eyes. So they are basically tall, dark complected humans. And that's pretty much it. With that, they have 5 fingers and so forth. They're like a Nordic species, but of a slightly different color, more or less. Long legs, more or less. That's about it. But so I'm in this room. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Who are they in the echelon of the different beings that are here in Alliance to try and help us? So where do they fit in?
They fit in on each of the sides because the ETs can change their body containers, so it's difficult to pin them down.
Mhm.
I do know after a lot of information came out of me is that yes, they were Haujeans, but these were Draco souls, and souls universal, but they're it's whoever you're actually whatever collective you're part of, that's really what you identify with. But so these were Draco souls using the Haujean container bodies because they were more appropriate for whatever work they were doing. The interesting thing in this memory is I was Haujean in this memory too. What I remember from that was that they were attempting to get me as close as my original form as possible to gain any advantage that that would give them. And that's why I was exactly the same height as them. Otherwise, they'd be towering over me. I'm 5'9". I don't know, and this wasn't me. Wasn't my physical container body that I have now that was in this memory. It was a different one. It was apparently Haujean, but I don't know what I looked like. So anyway, I'm in this situation, and I'm very anxious. I'm not very happy with it because I know that they're going to put. At that time, I thought they were, from the frame of reference, from the context of it, I thought that I was actually, because there was a lot of lies that were told to me after this as I was trying to figure this out when I had contacts. I thought that they were putting my soul into a fetus, and this was going to be me. I was here for a mission, and this was my home planet. But in fact, it was White Sands, New Mexico. There's a facility that's under the mountain range area of that missile test range. This is where a lot of this stuff takes place. So I'm anxious. I'm protesting a bit at this point because I know they're going to give me a speech impairment, and I'm thinking about all of the people that I knew that had been put into this situation. And the thing that I feared the worst was being put into this situation and not being able to see, them taking away my eyesight. Because apparently, I was aware of other people that they had done that to. And that's one way to suppress and kind of keep you under control. If you're blind, you're not going to be very active in the things that they're worried about that'll trigger your awakening, such as getting involved with this type of information. So I'm worried about that. The person at the terminal was a male. He was sitting down. He says to me, "Do you want to be white or black?" And I said, "I prefer to be white because of the racial tension." And this told me another thing, that wherever I was, they were quite aware, and so was I, of the situation in the 1970s. And knowing that I was going into a challenging life experience, I wanted to reduce the amount of problems that I would have. So being white for me would be the ideal choice in that situation. I don't know if I would have chose something else because my skin was not white in that particular memory. Maybe I would have chose something else, but my attitude is that the container body is the clothing of the soul. So I made a joke that went flat in the room, and I simply said, besides, I like white skin anyway. Like I was, like I'd get some type of a rise or a response or humor, but the people in this room were all business and absolutely had no humor in them at all. And the next thing I know is I was complaining to them about, having to take some form of handicapped. And while I was waiting in suspense, because they seemed to, even though I was telepathic, they seemed to have a way to keep this information from me, so I didn't have it. What I refer to that is a consciousness simulation, actually a localized consciousness simulation. I could elaborate, but I'm not going to get too into that because I don't have a lot of time today. But they're able to prevent you, because what we're in right now is really a consciousness simulation. They can keep us limited to the five senses and keep information from us. They can keep us from remembering our past lives, and they can keep us from seeing them and knowing their agenda and knowing the agenda of each other and the government, which is ideally what they want. And so in this case, I wasn't sure, but I was protesting, and I remembered a friend who was apparently a close friend in this program, and he looked Haujean, and I didn't know what Haujeans were, so I thought maybe he was maybe he could be Asian, or Indian. I wasn't sure of this, but I saw him as he was at that very moment. I remote viewed him on Earth and was crystal clear. It wasn't like what you know we deal with now when we try to remote view. It's very, very difficult because the psychic signal's weak. I saw him. It looked like I thought it was maybe the streets of Chicago. It just had that big city feel. There was big skyscraper buildings around, and his mother was pushing him in a wheelchair up a sidewalk, and she had several, probably I think maybe 3 or 4 kids around her. And he looked like he had a condition similar to Stephen Hawking. He was very crippled up, very heavily disabled. And I know I didn't want to wind up like him. And I kept protesting. And that's when the female, who I later found out were what they called life engineers in this program, her name was Asib, and I had a lot of negative experiences with her over the course of my life. And she looked at me very sternly in my face, which I couldn't see her face because it was covered in these, she had these like a rectangle over top of her eyes, and I couldn't see. She said, "You have to take a handicap," very, very sternly, coldly, and just almost like an order. And at which point I just kind of looked at the floor, and I remember thinking to myself, I guess I'll figure it out when I get there. At which point I was told to get into the machine. I got into it. There's an enclosure. And now after I've had the hypnotic regression, I know exactly what this room looked like, and I'll describe it in a minute. But the machine, I guess I'll describe it now. The machine was white. It was very like a big plastic housing of some kind. Since I was 8 feet tall, this thing was probably about the same height as me, probably 7, 8 feet long. And then it at least 5 or 6 feet wide. It had a place to lay on that was sticking out of the front of it, which was another 8, 9 feet long. And then it had this enclosure that was hinged that would come down over top of it. It was crystal clear, looked like maybe a polycarbonate or some other material, but it wasn't normal materials because I could tell, because in the hypnosis, it didn't have any fingerprints, no smudges, no dust. It was crystal clear. It was completely molded, and it comes down over top. What happened is that in the final portion of the memory, as I was laying in it, they were communicating with me telepathically, standing at my left. And the machine, well, actually what I experienced I was just, the whole thing filled up full of white light. And I could see a fetus at the 12th week of conception. And I know this because this is one of these things that, where you have this memory, and then later on you have an important epiphany moment that comes later. When I took some nursing courses. I took anatomy and physiology, and my first day, when I opened my textbook up, the first day of class, I went straight to that section, and I looked up, and it was exactly what I saw at the 12th week. It was that stage of development. Later, I found out that this is through the ET contact, that they need to put a soul in that body before the 12th week of conception, because that's when the brain activity starts. If they wait, a soul is born simply by that particular act happening by, someone, excuse me, I'm getting thirsty. When you become conscious, that's when a soul is born. So in referring to the recycling system of souls, yes, they have to put you in there before that, or they increase the soul population. In this case, they had to put me in there at that point.
Can you explain increasing the soul population?
Yeah, the way I understand this, and this is from contact that I've had, is that 1/3 of us are on this planet are star seeds. We come here from other worlds for a variety of reasons. We're kept here as prisoners. We're we come here to be social implants or social influencers. And when I call a positive planetary social engineering program, there's also a negative side of that, because there's two sides to this ET agenda. There's a positive and a negative. I don't know the details, and a lot of people seem to do, but a lot of those people also seem to be getting deceived. Actually, a lot of those people with the elaborate stories appear to be being deceived, especially the more detailed and elaborate it is. No, I'm completely happy with the vague sense of it for that reason. But and then the other 2/3 are basically the fledgling race project that has been hijacked by these negative extraterrestrials and has been more or less turned into a soul slavery farm and God knows what else. Um, so I hope
So
that answers the
if
question.
if a soul comes in, and sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but sometimes there's like these questions that need to
No,
be.
I want you to ask questions. It helps me out.
So if a soul doesn't go into the body until it's born, is that something that they don't like because they can't control it?
I really don't know. I mean, if they can't control it, then therefore they don't like it.
Mhm.
So I just know what's happened to me. I haven't done enough research on others
Mhm.
because it just, the amount of time it takes to do it. So there may be other things that they have done. And I think in that case, they would take the soul out that's already in and put you in or somebody else, whoever's going in. So I don't know much about that.
So if they have to put a soul in by the time it's 12 weeks old because they're afraid of consciousness, if they miss the mark of the 12 weeks, is it because they don't want that soul's consciousness to go into that body?
Well, what I understand is if they wait past that, it would either create a soul or they would put somebody in it. And there's an AI system.
Mhm.
So just kind of using logic here without having a direct answer to your question, I would assume that the AI system would fill somebody in, would actually take somebody that they already have and put them in and completely, wipe their memory of the past life.
Mhm.
So I don't really know too much about that. I just know what I've been through and I pieced it together as best I could. I don't like using other people's info unless it resonates with me, but I prefer to really stick with my own
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
just use that because it just makes it easier, and it's also easier to tell people because you don't want to have somebody else's info when you're trying to explain your own.
Yeah.
It just gets too complicated to try to say this is this and that's that. So so anyway, getting back where I was, yeah. So when I did the actual hypnosis session, there was a lot of information I couldn't get. I couldn't get anything about the actual abduction. Those fragments came to me afterward. Um, I had a lot of programming that I knew that I had to get rid of first, and it had to do with 15 years or so of being lied to by ETs, and I had a completely different preconceived idea of what my soul history was and why I was here. And yeah, I knew that my higher self was active in this. I was told going in just to it'll be fine. Just let it happen. And when I got out of it, I wondered why I couldn't get any more than that. And it was actually revealed inside the hypnosis session. It's because of the programming. I had to get rid of the programming first before I could handle the truth. And what I got was that wasn't home. That was White Sands, New Mexico. And that put me into a deep 2-month depression. The kind of depression where, there's days that you feel like you can't get out of bed and you don't want to because you don't want to, you just want to go back to sleep and not face it.
Mhm.
And so it's been really, really hard. And that was incredibly hard because everything that I thought I knew about myself, because the mind control is so intense. I mean, they implant emotions in you, or they bring out emotions. And I went through a type of past life memory regression torture. It was more of an emotional memory regression torture. I had memory fragments, but the intense emotions that I had to deal with, not just the homesickness, the feeling of being trapped, but the mind control that they put me through, and the people that they brought me with. Actually, they brought me together with people that some I was lied to, and they were supposed to be past life friends or family. They weren't. They were just another victims in this. And there was somebody that was part of that past life family, and that caused me to have 5 years of post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, it was really, really horrible. It finally ended where they put something in me that blocked it. So I recovered from the post-traumatic stress disorder relatively quickly within a matter of a few days. It took about a month, and I mean, I felt like I had a lobotomy. Literally, I had no emotional response, and then it slowly wore off. After about a month, I was kind of like just like a feather kind of falling to the ground. I just had a soft landing, and I was able to kind of move on with it and be tortured with other things. But that was horrible because, you know, I would look at people that looked like they were Haujean, like Hispanic people, Indian people. It would trigger this stuff. I'd break down. I'd have to hide it from my wife. I mean, there was one time I was eating at a Mexican restaurant, and it hit me, and I had to go to the bathroom and lock myself in. It was a single-use bathroom, and I had to get it out, get myself together for 10 minutes before I could come back out. And luckily, nobody knocked on the door. And I've had plenty of experiences like that. There's no way to live your life. So, but so yeah, the soul transference memory. I was in what I really got when I got the clear picture of it. I mean, it was a lab, but it looked like the furniture inside the lab was from the 70s, had that Formica look to it. The cabinets were that fake wood color with almost like a laminated type wood grain on it. It looked very dated, but inside that room was advanced technology that would make, you know, George, you know, well, you know, the guy that did the Star Wars movies, he would be pretty much drooling with his, you know, with his mouth open if he knew what that was. And if he could see it. I mean, it was very, very advanced. Anything that could fracture a soul and then transfer that fragment into, you know, like a human, you know, fetus at any stage for that matter. So yeah, that was it. Now, when I did the when I did the hypnotic regression, how I knew that this was the case is because James Rink used various techniques to try to trigger my subconscious to, you know, to release something. One of them was that he had me look at myself when I was in the lab, and when I did, I saw light tactical armor on my body. And it looked like some of the things you see in the Halo video game, which was copied from his work and others. And so that was the first clue. He had me get inside the machine. When I did, I could see. That's how I know there was that, you know, the lid was clear. I was looking out of it. When I looked at my feet, I had those little hospital footies on. I had a gown on. I wasn't wearing the tactical armor anymore. So there was a piece of that memory was taken when I got undressed before I got into that machine. And then, of course, when your subconscious is releasing information, it's not actually part of the memory, but it's a clue. You know, I can't really say that I had the, you know, the light armor on at the time I was standing there. I may have been in a hospital gown. I don't know. And I probably was because I got right into it. I may have already came in that room and had that on and then got out of it and put the gown on. So it was that. And then, yeah, the other thing is how I knew it, how I knew what it was is when he said, okay, I want you to step out of that room and go back into this hallway that I had to visualize. It was a hallway that had a bunch of offices where every time I'd go through the door, that was to try to unlock a new memory or to you know, to look. And it was like a way of triggering the subconscious to give you something more or less. So when I stepped out of that room that I was in with the lab, I stepped into a military base. And it was the same military base that I've had dreams for about 20 years in my early adulthood and my, you know, childhood as well. Probably close to my late 20s is when I think it actually stopped, because there was a couple years later, that's when this other contact started with the satanic cult, Enki cult thing. But I'd have these repetitive dreams of being in this underground facility, and it was a military base. I knew, I had the sense that there was extraterrestrials there. In the dreams, it would always start the same way. I would find an underground entrance, either in a cavern that I was exploring, or I would go to a metal building and go down an elevator or stairs. Just things like that. I would just, one time I went down in the subway and found a door, and bam, I was right back into this facility. And one interesting dream was I was exploring a cavern, and the cavern was in the middle, looked like the Southwest, looked like Utah. The entrance was under a big rock. It was a stomach crawl. We went into this cavern passage. I went in with other people, but they weren't with me when I got in it. And I walked to the end of this like a hallway. It was all, you know, it was a trunk passage of a cave, and at the end of it was a metal door, a clean looking painted metal door with a security camera. And I went in it, and the weirdest thing was is that while I was in this space, nobody bothered me. I could walk anywhere I wanted to. I had free reign of the place. In the dreams, I even climbed up in the ceiling. There was a couple of spots where the ceiling was low enough where I could jump up and grab the metal framework and pull myself in it. And I'd sit there and watch people. This is the way the dream would work. I'd walk around the base and nobody would bother me. There was one particular one I remember that was weird because it was just strange. I walked past a room and it looked like it had liquid air in it. And it looked like maybe there was some kind of energy field that was separating the atmosphere from the hallway to the room itself. And it was a lab and there was people in there. There was a screen on the wall, and on the right hand side, it looked like a lab table, like one of those long ones you find in like a high school or, you know, lab. And I just had a weird, I mean, it was just very, very strange. And I never really thought much of it, but I always enjoyed the dreams because they were repetitive and they were lucid. And what I believe they were fragments that were implanted in me in a dreamscape. They were fragments of actual memories. You know, you would think that they'd want to keep me completely ignorant of this if they didn't want me waking up. But what I learned was that they were trying to pacify my urge to wake up by giving me this stuff. If they could derail or give me something that would hijack me and you know, my effort to wake up and actually give me a false reality to live in, such as the starseed stuff with, you know, with the new age and all the love and light, you know, that would be something that would be very, very useful. Well, they tried that, and but the first they tried the satanic cult stuff. Within 7 months, I figured out that that was a complete ruse. That we were getting attacked by angels, and we were communicating with pagan gods. And I realized that the angels and the pagan gods are all on the same side, and somehow I didn't know the AI was involved at that point, but somehow I knew they were able to pull off these elaborate mindscape or astral experiences with all of us. And they were able to create a completely simulated world of some kind for us to interact with real people that seemed real, that would be in these experiences. And it took me a long time to realize, but it's transdimensional AI that connects with the collective consciousness and is able to create these types of scenarios and experiences to completely deceive us. And I can see you're shaking your head. So obviously, you know all about this stuff thy, which is why I'm here. So,
Yep.
can you share something? Because I'm really dying to hear something.
Um,
throw me a scrap.
Ask me a specific question.
Okay. Have you had these odd type of AI astral experiences? Is there anything
A lot of well, you know, to the surprise of many, and this may be, I don't know, disturbing, I'm not sure, but when I was 8, Metatron came. And Metatron is AI. There is, if you want to call it biological, on a different density merged with AI. So, but, you know, they can simulate whatever reality. And by that, I mean, the beings that interact with you, they can simulate any theater to try and convince you of that reality.
Right.
To try and get you to do whatever they want. So I had techniques when I was young to figure out when it was a simulator. And that is what helped me, because you can't distinguish it, and your brain can't distinguish it. It doesn't know the difference.
Right. Your soul has to distinguish it.
Right. So there's, I mean, they know that neurally there is no difference. The same in real dream. Your experiences in real dream and what this 3D theater is, it's indistinguishable.
Right. It's all just, it's all the product of I would say like a universal consciousness that we're all part of. We're like
Right. We're in a
nerds,
motherboard, if you will.
in a
Right?
sense, but more or less an organic, energetic one, not
Yeah.
the computer simulation that they're trying to push on us, which,
Which they
really,
hope to change into a fully artificial one.
yes, yes,
Um,
right.
but yeah, this is also the reason why they love accessing people through real dream,
Hmm.
because they map you out. When they map you out, they have access to your stargates, your portals on all those dimensions and all those levels. So you're living a multi-dimensional existence interdimensionally.
Right.